Um, Welcome. I've really been looking forward to this, to be with all of you and talk about Ardain's wonderful book. I've shared it with many people, and spoken about it to numerous folks. And I have a very, even though I have a very different background, mostly writing and screenplays the last 10 years or so, maybe longer. I have done novels before, and it's fairly recently. Um, but reading Ardain's books, both of them, in this set here, reinvigorated and uh, in me to write another novel. So, thank you for doing that. I really appreciate that.
Wow.
We have also with us Anne. Could you please introduce yourself?
Oh, I would love to. My brain is not working very well today. I've been in Nutcracker rehearsals all week, and what little I had has drained out. But I am an author of paranormal mysteries and suspense stories normally, and also a former ballerina who now teaches and obviously rehearses Nutcracker all week. So that's basically me. I also grew up in Great Britain and came to the United States when I was about 13. And I'm thoroughly American, but I still have a little tiny accent left.
And I am Rashmi Boratas. I'm settled in Atlanta, and I could just summarize it in this way that writing is therapy for me. And I am superbly excited to join my writer friends, Gabriel and of course, our wonderful host of the conversation, Dr. Isma, to talk about his latest novel. Last spring was Bittersweet. Dr. Isma and I, a few weeks ago, had a conversation on that book, and now we are so fortunate to have two wonderful writers joining us. And Dr. Isma, how do you feel as we all, have gathered to talk about your novel?
Surreal to say the least. I have to say that writing these two books, I never expected, for very sophisticated writers as you are, to see an interest in the story. Just like Gabrielle just said, writing is universal, and also human stories are universal. So he can relate to those stories, and specifically when it comes to struggle and hardship, and also the story of love. So, and all of these blends into the human spirit. So I have to say thank you so much for giving such a close attention to the stories of men and women who having to left their countries and seeking, a better life elsewhere. And I just happen to be the one to, at least a writer among the many immigrant fiction writers, to write a story in. I can see you guys appreciate.
Thank you so much. So, those of you who are watching, we have decided to take turns in discussing this fabulous novel, and we have all selected the areas that we'd love to speak about. So, may I request Anne to start with? And I think I'll be the last one to talk after I hear what my wonderful friends have to say.
Okay.
Well, I think what I'm going to talk about briefly is the writer's journey with Ardain. I'm fascinated to know what started him writing in the first place. Have you, Ardain, always written? Or was it something that you came to a bit later in life after you'd finished all your, wonderful education that you've had? And I want to talk about that some more too.
Okay. The question is directly to me. Yes, I've always, especially storytelling. Since I really was a kid back in Haiti, I always liked to listen to the old folks telling me stories dating all the way back to the 1900s, and I never forget those stories. And also, I have an uncle. I make reference on the story about Uncle Tony. is a very funny gentleman. He would spice the stories also, you know, dropping bits and pieces that I didn't hear before when I heard the story for the first time. So because I love telling stories, and some stories can be very, can bring happiness, but also some others would bring sadness. So I was thinking of writing a story about an immigrant journey. And I also needed to write a story which would be a character-driven story. And it would be the protagonist telling his own story through the mirror reflection of my own experiences coming to the United States as a young boy, and try to make my way around in order to survive, just like many other immigrants really do. So that was the reason why. But writing itself, I've always wanted to write, but to become a writer, specifically a writer. So I started doing this after my thesis, uh, when I was doing my doctorate degree. So I saw how people relate to this to the writing, and I did my dissertation on multiculturalism or cross-cultural awareness. So I see how they like that. So I said, well, if I'm going to be a writer, a novelist, I would have to include this very strong, powerful element into my story in order to embellish the stories of immigrants that too often, you know, are being that simply just overlooked. So that's what prompted me to begin to write as a writer, as a novel writer.
Oh, I think that's fascinating. I'm also one of the things I love about, I know Rashmi is going to talk about the immigrant's journey a little bit later, which is, I think, a really fascinating aspect of what you write about. But I am so grateful to have learned more about the American Haitian community through your books. Um, the richness of your culture really interests me. Hey, I have a question for all of you, actually. I was listening to Ardain talk about how he had heard stories literally around the fireside about Haiti and Haiti's uh, vast and interesting cosmology. But I kind of had a similar experience growing up, where my mom was very much involved with the sort of tales of Wales and the sort of Celtic Tulweth Tag and all that sort of thing. So I grew up with that as well, and it also pushed me towards writing. Was that true for you both as well? Did you grow up in a family that had lots of storytelling and kind of got you rolling on it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because when you were referring, you were talking about stories around the fireplace, immediately I remember something like I'm from the northeastern part of India, and we have a festival in January, and it is more like a harvesting festival, something not exactly, but similar to the concept of Thanksgiving, where you thank the Lord for the food you have. And often it happens is that we would have a fire outside the house, and the family would gather around it, and then we have the elders, the grandparents, or the parents, telling us tales of the past, and the younger generation would listen. So that is an integral part of the culture. And then we have like my grandmother, I would say, there was a time when they would cook food in the kitchen, like on the fire. And then, there would be a big band, big batch of grandchildren sitting all around the grandmother. And, she would tell stories of what happened in the past, how things have changed. So I think probably it is an integral part of, most cultures. Gabriel?
That's fabulous. How about you, Gabriel?
I have a little. I didn't have any of that. I wish I had been from Wales so I could say tales from Wales. Uh,
Ooh, the ultimate zinger, right?
my mother always read to us a lot and read stories to us a lot growing up, but she never told stories. In fact, her life was very much something she never talked about, or let alone any stories. So I never had any stories growing up like that, just things I read in books.
I think it is the process, though, of hearing the language
Mm-hmm.
and the stories. So obviously your mom was doing the same sort of thing, except maybe not quite as much culturally related to her, but
Right,
in the
right.
world
It
in
wasn't,
general.
they weren't personal stories or family
Mhm.
history stories or anything like that. It was just from different people's
Mhm.
books and stories. Yeah.
Oh, I think that's lovely, actually. I'm all for mums reading. I think that's great. Dads too.
Okay.
Ardain, one of the hallmarks of your novels is the rich and wonderful language that you use. You're an extraordinarily uh, gifted writer in terms of vocabulary and the way that you set up descriptions and character and dialogue as well. Um, and yet you're obviously English is a second language
Right.
for you. Can you tell us a little bit, and your audience out there, a little bit about your education and how you learned English? And because you handle English like a master. I mean, you're a wonderful, wonderful writer in English, and I'm sure a brilliant writer in French as well. But tell us about it. I'd love to know more.
When I came to the United States, I spoke no English whatsoever, obviously. And I remember the first time I had to go to an English school. It was a night school that they organized for young refugees. At the time, it was the early 1980s, actually 1980, doing the huge mass migrations from Cuba, from Haiti, in particular, coming to Miami. And English schools, like night schools, I would say they were just like mushroom and the morning dew. There were so many of them. So my sister decided to take me to one of them, which was way, very close to downtown, not far from where we lived. And when I walked into the school, I realized that most of the people, they could not even read in their own language, let alone trying to read something in English. So I struggled there, and I stayed there for about 3 months. When the semester ended, I told my sister, I don't want to go back to the school because I'm not learning anything whatsoever. Because prior to coming to the United States, I had already, towards the end of my secondary schools in Haiti. So it didn't fit for me. And the next semester, I was enrolled into the Miami-Dade Community College. There was a specific program for young immigrants. There was a reference also I make in the book. Uh, in 1980, when I went to the U.S. Immigration um, Service down in Miami, I was giving a paper which says, which was a temporary stay into the country. But we also were giving an appointment to return in 3 months, which we did, my sister and I, along with a whole bunch of thousands of people. And we were told then, okay, since the studies of young immigrants coming to this country could not be settled in Washington, so they gave us a paper with a stamp that says Cuban Haitian. And they told us not to return anymore until a final decision was made to decide what to do with these people. So with that paper, I became sort of, quote unquote, a legal resident. With that also, I was eligible to receive financial assistance, financial aid to go to college. So I seized upon this opportunity to go to Miami-Dade. And this is how I started to learn English with a whole bunch of people. I mean, but my same age, uh, many of us, if not most of us, had some level of education. Cuban, Haitian, Dominicans, a whole bunch of us. And then I started, and I remember my first teacher, first English teacher, was a woman named Miss Susan. I never really remember her last name. And every time she gave me something to write, I would write it with some vocabulary. And she would pull me over at the end of the class. She said, but you're very good. I didn't know why she was saying that, but I struggled very hard to learn English. And of course, learning English comes with it also making friends. And I had an opportunity to make a lot of friends, including girls, and that was important to me. And that's how my English somehow took off. But with that, also my educational English started. And then I went on to graduate from Miami-Dade, and I transferred from there to Barry University Scholarship, which is a private and very prestigious institution in Miami Shores. And I graduated there. And then with a bachelor's degree in computer science.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is how the story unfolded. From that, I went to have a master's degree at Nova Southeastern University, which later on I ended up being teaching there. And then I transferred to Walden University to have a doctorate degree at Indiana University in Bloomington. I don't know if you've been in IU.
Yes. Yeah.
So from then on, I developed such a big interest into writing because I saw how my professors, the people I work with, and my dissertation committee, they encouraged me to pursue this avenue of writing. So that's how I became so. But I've always fascinated about writing.
Well, I'm really impressed because your English in your novels has such subtlety. And you're able to both eviscerate the pompous, patronizing people so elegantly, and yet you also speak of love and honor and dignity and other crucial elements of your story with great subtlety and great flair. So you're, as I say, you handle English as a master. So I bow to you because I could not do it in a second language. I am positive of that. I remember telling you once that I was taking a Navajo course.
Yeah, we talked about that. I remember.
Right. I can probably say my grandmother has a donkey, and that's as far as I get. But I'll bow to you.
But you know what? A lot of one thing that many people do not realize. Okay, English has more than 20,000 words that are either French or French based. I already knew French, and because of that, it helped me a lot in my English acquisition. So, if you can speak French, you may struggle, but ultimately you will, if that's what you want, you will be able to master English.
Well, I think you're being very hopeful and very generous in your estimation of what I could do with a second language. But I think most people, because I'm just an absolute idiot with languages, but I think maybe more people, if they had a romance base, maybe could pick it up better than me. But I think I should not hog all the time and switch to Gabriel. I'm sure he has interesting questions as well.
Well, I thought that was really interesting also because for a couple of years, I helped teach a couple who were in their 50s who had lived in the US for about 10, 15 years. Tried teaching them English and also preparing to take their citizenship test. And they worked in strawberry fields, picking strawberries, literally 10, 12 hours a day. They didn't hardly have time ever to learn English. And all their family and people around them all spoke Spanish. So in the process of doing this, I know how hard it is for me to learn a different language. I can really relate to you, Anne, as far as learning other languages. I tried Spanish for years and years and years, and I can say a little more than, with the donkey, your grandmother has a donkey. but very little bit more than that. So, but seeing how it was for them and how difficult it was, I was just so admired their sticking with it and how hard it can be. As opposed to, at least if you're, I don't know if this is true, Rashmi, but I think in India, English is taught a lot as a second language. So if you're educated, then a lot of people learn English as their, so it's not as big a shock or thing. But for people that have not had any other country, but their other language than their native language, English can be really, really difficult, especially if you don't already know French, because it's got so many weird things. My wife's mother is from Germany. She's 94 and she's lived in the States for 65 years. She still has a really strong accent. And she still, sometimes when people say something in English, it's a slang or something, and she'll take it literally. And there's some really funny stories about things that she thought people said. I think you actually share a couple of those, Ardain, in the book, that somebody said this, and then what did that mean? One of the things that was interesting to me, that I really identified, as well as everything else, but especially, was the universality and the connection of this person wanting to make a better life, doing everything they could in spite of prejudice. Irvin, of just going through one thing after another and doing it without much family at all, until his sister Nana is finally, is there and supports him through everything. But I can't even imagine I know a lot of people have done it, but to be 16 and come on your own to another country where you don't know the language, and to have to learn all these things, as well as trying to then get a job and deal with all the other things. But in the midst of all that, one of the primary things of this story is the love affair between Irvin and Michaela. And that is something, well, I think the immigrant story is pretty universal for probably half the world, because probably half the world have to immigrate or leave their country or go somewhere else or choose to at some point. So it's a pretty universal thing, but love stories are even more universal. And the way that he's, as a young person, learning about what it means to be in a relationship with somebody and what that means when somebody says this or that, not knowing what that is himself for sure, and then trying to negotiate that with other teenagers, or slightly older, let alone friendships. But as far as a relationship with somebody else, in that way, that part is, I think, most anybody can identify with, whether it's no matter what the relationship with, no matter what the love relationship with it or who it's with. It's just the feelings of misunderstanding, or the feelings thinking that you've been betrayed, or thinking that somebody's lied to you about something, or purposefully doing or trying to figure out when somebody is or isn't, when that person is trying to figure it out themselves and they maybe don't know. That you were able to portray so much of that so well with him and his thoughts and his feelings. And I really like it. Sometimes people say, well, is this story about you? And as though, well, writers, you should be able to write about people and, not have yourself in it. And if you're a really good writer, then you should be able to write about anything and convey the thoughts and emotions and feelings and what's going on in the environment. I don't think that's always true at all. I think that actually everybody who writes, there's something about ourselves that gets put into the different characters, or gets put in the environment, whether we're aware of it or not. I think there's a lot of it. And I get the sense that a lot of Irvin in his relationship and what happened to him is really a lot of what you went through. And my question is if that's so, and if that actually was really beneficial for you in writing this book. Did you use that or try to distance yourself from that when writing it?
On book one, it was more of some sort of a personal experiences because I was younger, and then in book two really many of these things. Of course, you can see me throughout the book if you know me
Yes.
throughout the book. But when it comes to his relationship with uh, that young lady before he flies to Paris and the thing that fell through, uh, I got these based on some colleagues that, of course, become close friends over the years. I see what they've been through and go into relationships like this. So that was sources of inspiration for me writing those lines. Of course, you can never remove me as a human being from the story itself. After all, yeah.
Yeah. Have people you uh, have relationships with personally, have they read the book, and could they could
Uh-oh.
they could they see themselves in it and identify that that's sort of what you were basing some of that on?
You know what? As if you knew, I thought maybe somehow we saw Gabriel done somewhere in Miami. Maybe last week he was in Miami. I'm just teasing. But I've got a couple of emails and messages from old friends back in the day. Uh, when we went to school together, college together. And then they say, you know what? I know who you were talking about. I said, no, this is a fictional story. Come on, don't lie to me. I know exactly. Because that's exactly. See, you're so far removed in terms of where you live, but you can see it must have been some experiences, personal experiences that would lead me as a writer to write what seems to be so true uh, in a fictional story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm gonna piggyback really quickly on Gabriel really fast because it was something I thought about when I read the book, and I have no idea whether you intended this or whether it's just something that I created when I was reading it. But I was really interested. There's that lovely description you do of Irvin in the ship at the beginning
Oh,
of,
okay.
yeah,
The
where he's sort
prologue.
of, yeah, where he's waiting to kind of get into the United States. And I don't know if I can be articulate enough to express this properly, but there's a feeling that you have with him throughout both novels that communication is really important, and that somehow I sort of myself kind of imagined him feeling cut off from his home country of Haiti and not yet at the United States, and he's lost in this ship coming across, hiding, whenever they needed to, elude customs or Coast Guard or whatever to get to the United States. And it seems to me throughout both books that it's so important that he reach out and talk to people, or get some feeling back about how people are feeling about him. And in my head, I sort of thought, well, he's got this kind of trauma of having been in this isolating situation by himself, coming over to this strange new land in a way in which he's isolated anyway because he doesn't speak the language. And I hope this will dovetail into Rashmi's section, but I wondered if that was part of what you were thinking when you wrote it. And I was thinking of her away in France, away from him, and he can't communicate with her. She's not coming back to him. She's not calling him. She's not writing him. And his frustration and this fear, this trauma, to me seems to build up in him in the story. And I want to connect it back to that initial journey to the United States, and wondered if that was something you thought about when you were writing it.
Actually, something that I lived in. This whole thing, actually, I would say it's me. One thing I didn't say, because the story begins in the high seas, but what I can add into that is I lived in Haiti. I lived in a small town called St. Louis. And then at St. Louis, there's a bridge of ocean that splits the town to a main island called Tortuga, which is the northwest part of Haiti. So all those destinations, not all of them, maybe many of them, because I was young, I can't remember, but most of them would transit from that island en route to the United States or the Bahamas or somewhere. I had never been on a ship before. So one morning when a gentleman showed up at my mom's door and talked to my mother, oh, of course, he already knew because my parents had arranged all this, and took me to a location in the southern edge of the town. It was early morning, I would say about 11 a.m. And they led me there, and they took me to a house, but there was no one in the house. Behind of which was well, very close to the ocean, was the sandy beach of the town. And across the ocean is the island of La Tortue or Tortuga Island. I waited there for maybe about 4 hours alone. And meanwhile, I see other kids, children playing, and I wish I could be like them because I was, at that time, I was living a very uncertain moment. And 4 hours later, so that's when people came and talked to me. And then they asked me to board a ship, which I did. On the ship, that's when I met other people, other passengers. And that trip, maybe about 2 hours just to get to the island. And on that island, so they led me into a house, introduced me to a woman, and they say this is where you're going to spend the night, young man. So I just stood there, but I'm so scared. I'd never been in a territory without my parents or without someone with whom I could relate all my life up until then. So I couldn't sleep all night. By 3 a.m., that's when people come and then to get me and a whole bunch of other folks. And then they took us there to on the Cells boat, which was in the main boat. They took us behind, I would say, a few miles on the and shores, I would say. So there we waited. Have you ever been when someone suffers from seasickness and you have to you throw up all the time, your head is spinning? So this is exactly how I felt. And that poor lady I mentioned in the prologue, her name is Janet. And that was a real name. I don't say her last name or anything, but it was Janet. She knew my mom and she kept me there. And she let my head rest on her lap and she kept putting water to wash my face. She kept telling me, you'll be all right, you'll be okay. So until the second boat that would be going to Miami arrived, maybe 4 or 5 hours later. Yeah. That's when the agony for me ended. So that's where I started the story. I started the story right there. And then taking the gentleman all the way down to Miami, and all the scares and all the worries, immigration customs and all this kind of things. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So much braver than me. I would have been would have been a wreck. Well done.
You know what? At some point, I remember on the third day, there was a seabird that flew over me. Because I remember when I was a kid, my grandmother always say, if you at sea and you see a bird, that means you're not really very far from land. So in my mind, I thought maybe very close to Miami. I just saw a bird.
And it's only another week after that.
Another week by, before we could see land. So it was a pretty scary moment. And years later, when I go back on cruise ships with my wife, and I see this vast ocean, and the boat we were in was so small, and I wonder how we did it.
Yeah. Were you horribly seasick ever?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, at that time, it was the first time find myself on a ship. But when I went on a one-day cruise to Freeport, Bahamas, when my wife was pregnant with our last baby. I just wanted to just relive this moment. It was the first time since I left Haiti. I got sick all the way to Freeport. Yeah.
You sure it wasn't sympathetic sickness with
I don't know. I mean, I saw people were moving around, dancing and eating food. My head kept spinning since Haiti. Yeah. But that was the last time too. We went to several cruises and it never happened again. So I guess just like you say, Gabriel. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Rashmi, what was the things that you were to focus on with Ardain and share and ask and
Yes. Actually, as you guys were asking him questions, I was really enjoying the wonderful questions. And I was thinking, what am I going to ask him? Because I had already asked him way too many questions. And after his first book and his second book, including rapid fire questions last time, personal details. But I really need to share this part, my experience about reading both these novels, that they really have my heart and soul, because realistic fiction is among my favorites. And this being an immigrant novel, I could relate so much to that, because anybody who comes to this country, they may have different versions, but it's the same story we tell, because it's a struggle for existence, to establish your identity. And another thing, how you don't know how you will be accepted in a new country, because I think you have a lot to prove yourself. Like, let me just, cite a personal example, because I came to the US as a student in my early 20s. And when I enrolled myself into the university, my first semester, I hardly knew anybody out there. And so I constantly felt that I need to prove myself to my classmates, because they did not know me. And definitely I was talking with a different accent. I was not, although I knew English well, but I was talking little differently from them. And I noticed a difference, that after the first semester, once the exams were over and everything, so that in the second semester things were a little different, because they probably knew that I will be able to grasp whatever. And actually this reminds me so much when in the novel, like, someone asks, Winkle tells a friend that the friend asks him that you have graduated from a very good university and you have a degree in software engineering, but how come that people, you were not getting what you deserve? And that's when he said that no one takes into consideration that I have come, that I have graduated with a degree and from a university, because he felt that he needed to prove himself a lot. And that's what I could relate to. And another thing that is the best part in the novel is the nostalgia. And I think we already discussed that with Dr. Isma when we had the interview. And this is what I feel, that, for any piece of immigrant fiction, if there is no nostalgia, and I mentioned in a review that I'd recently written for Dr. Isma's book, that it is just like you're not able to envision or nor experience the beauty of spring when there are no flowers around, there are no birds chirping. And similarly, if you read an immigrant piece of literature without nostalgia, you don't really get the emotional vigor out of it. And that is what I like so much in Dr. Isma's novel. And I have mentioned in my previous interviews too, there is an Indian writer, Jhumpa Lahiri, and she is one of my favorites. And she wrote an immigrant novel. The name of the novel is The Namesake. And when I read Dr. Isma's novel, I remember, the way she described, not described nostalgia, but how nostalgia flew through the pages. Because, like, how he talks about identifying with the members of the Haitian community, how he used to say that the little Haiti community made him feel closer to home. That is what she writes in her book. And I feel that, if you have a passion, or if you're deeply in love with your country and you write a piece of literature, I think that without nostalgia it will not reach the level that it needs to. And that is what impressed me about this novel. It kept me engrossed, and I felt as if someday, hopefully, I write a novel, probably I will end up writing a lot about what I miss from home. Because, yes, because remember, Dr. Isma, I told you once that, you may take me out of India, but you cannot take the India out of me. So that is what I felt when I reading your novel, that, you used to mention so much about the Haitian culture and the music and family. So in that connection, I think that is one question that I did not ask you in my last interview, but something that I want to ask, like, what did you miss most about home when you came to the US, and which finds expression in the book?
Okay. I miss basically the food, the organic food that you would eat in Haiti on the island. It took me a while to begin to get used to. Even when my sister cooked, and she was a great cook, for some reason, the taste itself, no matter how much spices is in there, it took me a while. Because I remember in Haiti, the food I used to have would be taken right off, the grandma's old backyard, completely organic, even when you eat just chicken, So it took me a while because my sister had to go to the supermarket to get those pieces of chicken, and the taste probably been wiped away by so many, ingredients that they put in there. So, yeah. But over time, that faded away. I don't have such problem anymore. But the food really, and in particular, there's a specific food. I didn't mention that in both novels, but on Midnight at Noon, I make a lot of reference to this specific one. Is a specific what you call it, malanga, which is squash. People eat the roots of it like yam. So, but if you mix that with smoked fish, and you put some spice in there, oh, that's delicious. It's delicious. I really miss that a lot. And you can't find it in Miami,
I understand. And what Anne said, I too actually wanted to mention that in my previous interviews, but it never came out. We didn't get the time. That is about your mastery over the language. That is amazing. Considering the fact that you learned English later on in life and not, since childhood. I still remember, I don't know if I will be quoting it right, but there is a sentence, it's in your first book, where you write, more and more I was getting into the icy cave of sentimental ruthlessness. So
yeah.
I was thinking, where does that language come from? Because oh my gosh. And then there's when Vinko talks about missing Michaela, and he would say that when I did not meet her for a long time, I felt like a withered hibiscus waiting to be watered. So that is such beautiful language. So that is amazing. That is incredible.
Thank you.
So, do we have some more time?
Yeah, we could go for maybe another 5, because I really would like to. We can wrap up, but before we wrap up, Gabrielle, I saw that you wanted to say something.
Oh, Rashmi, I hope you start your novel tomorrow.
Me too. Please do.
You, all the writing I've read of you do with articles and everything, there's so much you bring out. It's almost like a whole story just in each thing that you're writing about.
Thank you so much. That is so kind of you.
I just can see you writing a thing that's combines a lot of nostalgia about India, as well as being living in the States, and I think you'll write a wonderful book too. So
thank you so much.
No doubt. No doubt.
I'm with Gabriel. I would wait in line, a long line, to buy a book that you would write about India.
Thank you so much. That is so kind. I'm so blessed to have such wonderful friends like you guys, who are so encouraging.
We'll all get together and all 3 of us will interview you.
Yes, that would be fun. We're all writers. We know talent when we see it.
Exactly.
Thank you so
much. But you know something, with all the beautiful writings about immigrant fiction, this genre is still considered as a subgenre in literature. Mostly you would see it fall under the category of multicultural. Even if you go to Barnes and Nobles and go to Books a Million or Amazon, you would type immigrant fiction, you won't find it.
It used to be, I think it used to be like, I remember around 20 years ago or so, there used to be a lot more immigrant fiction, even though that's not what they called it. It was just, and it was mostly European immigrant fiction.
What I was going to say.
It wasn't, it's changed so much now. It's, Asian immigrant fiction, South American immigrant, everywhere. But then it was like mostly like books like The Immigrant, the series The Immigrant, The Second Generation, The Establishment. It was all about an Italian family starting out in Italy and coming to the U.S. And there are a lot of books like that about England and other countries that were written in English and that were really popular in the States. A lot of Michener's stuff is, some of that is not immigrant, but he's talking as if he is. So I think it's come back a lot, but it still needs to be more, and it's much more diverse now than it ever used to be.
Yeah, and I also I do a lot of casting because obviously I'm in the theater, and I just like to pick I don't know if this analogy will work exactly, but I just like to cast the right ballerina in the right part, in the sense that if she's a fabulous dancer, I don't care what culture she comes from, as long as the language of her technique is, as Ardain would say, impeccable. She's going to be the Swan Queen. And I sort of think great literary writing should just be great literary writing. I don't know why we have to subcategorize everything so that it gets sort of shuffled off.
Yeah, and a lot more films and TV and productions now, a lot of them are just casting people in a variety of roles, not based on religion, sometimes not even based on gender. So I think that's the thing getting better.
I think it's great because I think we're more used to it when we go to see Shakespeare, because in Shakespeare there has been a tradition of casting all sorts of characters in different parts and different backgrounds, and it's starting now to move into what we would think of more traditional television or more traditional film. But I think it's great. The best person, the best actor, the best singer should have it, no matter where they come from. That's my opinion.
And Anne, I just got a little bit of your accent when you said theater.
Just a little tiny bit.
It's still
Welsh. Never.
And my Navajo is terrible.
I love the British accent. Actually, it is good. It sounds so good.
Thank you. And it comes out a lot more when I'm nervous, like right now. So
Really?
Mm, mm. It's interesting because about language, when you speak, Ardain, even though second English, it sort of goes along with what's been said before. I don't hear hardly any accent at all. And some people are able to do that. I don't know, like a lot of British actors can do English accents. You would have no idea they were British when they do it. And when you, not only when you write, but when you speak, I don't hear much of an accent either.
Maybe I think Anne can answer that
realized,
question.
yeah.
I think Anne can answer that question because I know you're a specialist on acting. I can see some writers, American writers, they mimic British accent very well if this particular role requires that. I can give an example of Denzel Washington and one of his movies. He was playing like a Jamaican cops or something, and he sounded just like anybody who can speak Caribbean English, yeah, or Jamaican English. He sound it must have had some practice doing that, prior to begin acting for the show, for the movie. So yeah, and why don't you think these actors, they practice first? There's a period of practicing before you can literally, speak as a British man or British woman. Don't you think? If you were born and raised in American English.
Yeah, but most people, I think, still keep some accent. And I don't know why a few people like you don't, and the rest of us do. Like if I go to another country, they say, "Oh, you're American," because they can tell from the way I speak English that I'm American.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, was there something, Ardain, that you have wanted to share with people that Rashmi about this book and about your writing that Rashmi had not asked you in or that we haven't asked you? Is there anything that you would want to finish up this time with and share with people about yourself or about the book or the writing that you think maybe hasn't been missed or hasn't been said, or maybe not in the way you want to say it?
Basically, I think that you covered pretty much everything. The only thing they tend to raise Romans behind the true message of the story itself, which is a story of resilience, a story of hope and determination. Of course, with a beautiful, I would say, backdrop of love story as a bonus. So I think the message sometimes seems to have lost into, the love story itself with Venko and Michaela. I guess maybe the beautiful language that the gentleman has been expressing seems to have a special attraction to readers. When they say they love Venko so much, despite his flaws, and his relationship, you have to like him. I think it's because of his deep, his deepest of emotion that he expresses when it comes to his relationship with, especially with Michaela. But also, there is a character in the story. People don't talk about it. And a character that I really like a lot, which is Judy. And she came in, she was in the first romance, book one, because a lot of people like Judy so much. I felt it was necessary, not necessary, but it was important that I'll come back with Judy in book two. What it is a love trap that people can find themselves with. Finding yourself into a relationship of which your heart is not really there. So you feel trapped or maybe condemned to live a life in solitude, I would say romantically, or do something about it. So when Judy tells him, you're the only man I've ever loved, and standing before you now, you can do whatever you want, and I'll enjoy it. But remember that it's wrong if we do that, unless you are prepared to accept me. And that's when Benko just get freaked out. This is not something that this is an adventure he can no longer afford to get himself into. And when Judy say, the way I feel now is just like the flame of love is taking me to a dangerous fire. That really mesmerizes him. Mm. And when you feel, you're fully in love with someone who will never be yours. So that part of the story, which what Judy told him at the night when they were separated, back in college. And then she comes back with it. And I saw many stories like this. And
that's really interesting. I appreciate that, and I think it's true that you feel that the love story and the love stories are a big part of it, but that really the heart of the book is about determination and resilience and staying with, that's the heart of the book, and hope, and continuing and not losing hope, even if there are times that you do. Because when you said that, I was thinking about the whole story again. I think that really holds true for the book, but that is the heart of it.
And of course, I just make sure, Anne, at the big party leading up to his big break, I would say, when all those stock Wall Street traders and all those wealthy people, and his boss was looking for that someone for him. When he finally meets that someone, quite uncertain because he's been deceived so many times before. It didn't really become clear that his life was dramatically changing until he actually finally secured the position. And I remember something that my mom always say, victory is so sweet because there were so many pitfalls along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our mothers and their stories are so helpful.
Thank goodness for them.
Yeah, and it was really sweet. It was very sweet for me when he finally, he's ascended to punch that.
Which you sum up beautifully. Pure love has won.
Mark Budman says this is the motto of the book itself. L'amour l'a remporté. Pure love has won.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Exactly where they went at the park there after the pregnancy test, and that's where I really the story ends also there, because I really wanted to make that connection. And this is the park I used to go a lot when I was a kid, when I was young. This is a place I know very, very well. Morningside Park. Yeah. So many friends, and we play soccer there.
We viewers, we had a wonderful time with Dr. Isma, with Anne, Gabrielle, and myself, interviewing him about his fabulous novel, Last Spring Was Bittersweet. I hope you all get to read both of these novels. And Dr. Isma, we look forward to having more books from you in the future. So on that note, thank you, all of you. It was a wonderful conversation, and I really had a nice time with all my fellow writers. Here's to wishing all of you the very best so that we get to read each other's books. Thank you so much, and good night, good evening, good morning, in whichever part of the universe you are in. Thank you so much.
That's great. Okay. All right.
Guys.
Bye.